Bill Cowan.
Thank you so much. Thank you for saying something about my wife. I'm proud of her. I met her at Michelle Bachmann rally on the west lawn of the Capitol building, and I got up to her. I'm a pretty guy. I'm not afraid of a lot. I was afraid of her. I got up the guts to go talk to her, and got her to come back up there to see a Glenn Beck rally, and kind of got a little spark for her. So we've had a wonderful 4 or 5 years together now. Let me just say quickly, if I can, I appreciate that. More of an introduction, the shorter the better. I've been a Fox guy, but the truth is I've been worked very special activities and operations up until about 2 years ago. In the Middle East, 13 times since this troops pulled out of Iraq. I know that region extremely well. It's been a good part of my life over the clandestine operations over there. I still, I'm not working for the government anymore, but I still talk and advise a number of people on things that they're classified, they'll always be classified. But there are things that are important for our country, so I always say it's been a privilege for me to serve this great nation of ours. My life is my life. It seems like a normal routine for me. I don't think anything special in it, except the chances and opportunities I've had to do things for our country. So I've got a fair amount of time here and a million things to say. Let me just start out by saying I'm on Cabuto today at 4:15 to talk about what's going on in Cuba. I believe that the White House wants to give the base at Guantanamo, not just the detention facility. I believe the White House wants to give the entire base back to Cuba. Raul Castro today demanded that we give the base back. And my points on Cabuto is I'm not sure why they should be demanding anything. What they should be thankful for is the fact that we're willing to re-engage in some kind of normalized relationship with them. And because of that, they ought to be saying thank you, not demanding something. Yeah. I also told Cabuto, I didn't get a chance to say this, but I said, look, I also want to take note of the fact, if I may, that in the intelligence community, Raul Castro is known as a cross-dresser. They've got a lot of pictures of him, dressed up as somebody he's not. But the Cabuto folks thought that would take away a little bit, so I made a promise to let me bring it up next time. There are so many things around the world, you know, we have an aggregation of things that we face as threats and problems to us, and I do my best to be as apolitical as I can, but you can't in this administration. Frankly, any of you know me for years know I had no trouble going after Bush, or Rumsfeld, or the Pentagon, or the White House in that era for mistakes that they made, and they made a lot. But the fact is, after mistakes happen or made, you have to have a way to, if we want to survive, we have to have a way to adapt and move forward. And I'm certainly critical of this White House. I give the President all due credit for the drone strikes that he's willing to run. And we should and could be running more, but our rules of engagement are so restrictive about not wanting to have collateral damage. None of us, nobody in this room, nobody in the Pentagon, nobody serving overseas wants to see innocent civilians die. We don't. It's not part of what we're trying to do. But we have to remember that there are prices to pay for victory. And all you have to do is think about World War II. Carpet bombing of German cities. It's terrible. Believe me, I was in Beirut in the worst days of the Civil War. I saw a lot of people die, women and children. This is when not only were the Muslims, the Hezbollah people, and Amal, the moderate Muslims, fighting against the Lebanese army and the Christian militias. But I also saw the Christians turn on the Christians and the Muslims turn on the Muslims. Those are horrific days. A lot of unfortunate, sad deaths. Sad, unfortunate deaths happen in wars. And if we're going to win, we have to accept the fact that that's going to happen. In fact, I've just started some investigation about some civilian casualties that occurred because of bombings against ISIS positions. It's a tragedy. But what are we telling our young men and women who are gathering the intelligence, who are selecting the targets, who are dropping the bombs, putting the bombs on? What are we telling them? Are we telling them we're not in the game to win? Let me be clear. Civilian casualties are terrible. They're terrible. I'm a big grown guy. I don't have a problem crying about some civilian casualties of innocence. But we're either going to win or we're not. And incidentally, that side has no problem with civilian casualties. None. And if anybody in this room is so naive to think that if we were surrounded by ISIS, we were all going to walk out of here alive because we're nice, happy, friendly people with a big smile, you got it wrong. We wouldn't. That's not the enemy that we're dealing with. I was on Hannity last night. When you speak about enemy, I spent all those years in the Middle East. Do I have a bad feeling about Muslims? Absolutely not. I was working on a daily basis with Muslims who were there to protect me, and they were dedicated to that. I had no question in my mind about my safety. And I said last night on Hannity, I said, you know, the problem with the failure of the administration, of the president, to identify the terrorists who they are, for who they are, Islamic radicals, Islamic fundamentalists, Islamic whatever. The president refuses to do that, as does the State Department, as does the White House. And I said, the problem with that is, we all know that it's Muslims that are doing this. When you don't identify which Muslims it is, the general public has this notion that, well, it's all Muslims. And so we're really providing a disservice to the peace-loving, good, honest, hard-working Muslims who are on our side. Now, they haven't stood up on our side like we wanted them to, because they haven't stood up out of fear. And, you know, I'll tell you that years ago, myself and some other pretty smart guys, some of the smartest guys I could get together, made a proposal to the government that we go out and empower the moderate Muslims by connecting them. You got Muslim clerics in Cairo who 7 or 8 years ago were standing up against the extremists. You've got Muslim athletes in the Middle East. You've got Muslim entertainers over in Asia. Very outspoken, all of them, but nobody was connecting. They're kind of like a lone voice somewhere, not having a chance to have somebody else say, you're right, let's get left. You all are a good example of it, saying we all need to get together to do something. The moderate Muslims have never been empowered to do that. And I blame the Bush administration, because there's no creative thinkers out there. Now, somebody in the last year or 2 or 6 months has been saying, hey, we need to empower the moderate Muslims. No kidding. Look where we'd be today if we had done that a long time ago. The most notable moderate Muslim, President al-Sisi in Egypt, who many of you may recall just a few weeks ago stood up in front of all these Muslim clerics, ranking Muslim clerics, all these Muslim scholars, and said to them, we Muslims have a problem, and we Muslims have to solve it. Much like Anwar Sadat was assassinated by his own people for the peace treaty that he struck with Israel, al-Sisi is probably not going to live another 10 years. Somebody will get him for doing that. But he has the guts to get up and say it. We all know that he's right. And against that backdrop, you know what this president and this administration is trying to do with President al-Sisi? They want him out. They want him out because they want the Muslim Brotherhood back in, because in their judgment, the Muslim Brotherhood was a democratically elected government. Well, let me give you a couple facts here. When Mubarak was out there, incidentally, Mubarak might have been kind of a bad guy. He wasn't really as bad as he gets. Mubarak did everything we ever asked him to do. Anything the United States asked him to do, he did for us. And for that, we kicked him to the curb, and after we had him down there on the curb, we stabbed him in the back as many times as we could. And we went to the Muslim Brotherhood and said, you know, you guys you're the hope for this country. So we're behind you all the way. We were. This administration was behind the Muslim Brotherhood. Mohammed Morsi, he was elected after Mubarak had been outed. He was elected with 13.2 million votes. 13.2. About 52 million people in Egypt could vote. So keep the numbers in mind. 13.2 wanted Mohammed Morsi. So on those numbers, he was elected. Within 9 months, 22 million people went to the streets demanding the ouster of Mohammed Morsi because of what he was doing to their country, taking away democracy, trying to introduce Sharia law, trying to change the Constitution so he would be president for life. 22 million versus 13.2 million. But that didn't mean anything to the White House. The same students that had been responsible, I met with a whole bunch of these people when I went over to Egypt a year and a half ago. I met with the same student leaders that had gone to the streets to oust Mubarak. A group of them, they weren't all the same people. It wasn't one group, it was a whole series of this group, that group, some other group, this town, that town, some other town. They all sat there. They were the same ones then that led the fight to get Mohammed Morsi out, to get him out as president. And General al-Sisi, as the leading general over there, went to President Morsi and said, Mr. President, we have 22 million people in the streets who want you out. Would you have a referendum? Can we go back and vote again? Let the people vote again to assure everybody in the country that you are the person they want as president. He refused to do it. He refused. Riots went out in the streets, people were killed. Although you should know, if you don't, Christian churches burned, Christian people killed, Christian houses torched, the whole thing. This was a Muslim Brotherhood. So President Morsi was arrested by General Sisi. The day he was arrested, an interim president was appointed. The day he was arrested, or 2 days later, they put a new constitutional committee together to rewrite the Constitution. It wasn't a coup. In my mind, I know what a coup is. A coup is when the military goes in, they blow the brains out of the leader, they declare martial law, they put police and military on every street, and they control the environment. Control the environment. That's not what happened. President General Sisi stood aside, said, we have a new president. Mr. President, what do you want us to do? A couple weeks after that, 40 million people, we've gone from 13.2 to 22 to 40. 40 million people went to the streets to support General Sisi. And wanted to be president, ultimately became president, was elected in last year. When we met, a small group of people that was General Sisi, I asked him, I said, General, what are your most important priorities as a military leader, and were you to be president, what's your most important priorities? Number one, Suez Canal. That's a pretty good answer. We never talk about the Suez Canal, do we? Imagine what would happen if the Suez Canal was shut down. The Suez Canal was threatened, incidentally, by Al-Qaeda and other insurgent operatives operating in Sinai, who, ironically, were supported by the Muslim Brotherhood, as was Hamas up in Gaza against Israel. So he said, number one, the Suez Canal. He said, number two, he said, I think our economy is most important. Our economy is hurting. We're having trouble getting tourists to come here. That's our main part of our economy. I have to work on that. And number three, which may be the same as number one and two, our relationship with Israel. Israel is our most important ally in this region. They're the buffer between us and what's going on in Syria. And if what's going on in Syria makes its way through Israel and gets to us, he said, we're going to fall. We're in big trouble. That's before ISIS even showed up on the scene. And he did say, he said, we have a relationship right now with Israel which is probably closer than at any time in my life. Clandestine, behind-the-scenes relationship, sharing information and intelligence, working with each other against Hamas and against insurgents in the Sinai. So here we got this guy, General al-Sisi, now President al-Sisi, who wants a good relationship with the United States. Does he have it? Nope. We had people at the State Department yesterday from Egypt, former members of the Muslim Brotherhood, on TV, flashing the Muslim Brotherhood sign. In our State Department, with our State Department insignia hanging on the wall behind them. Amen, we're over here. We got these guys. No kidding. That's the way we treat them. Who should be our number one member of the coalition against ISIS? Pretty big coalition. Our European partners are doing pretty good. Number one person, number one country in the fight against ISIS should be Egypt. They want to. They're ready to engage. They see the threat. They feel the threat. Are they with us in the coalition? Nope. We don't have time to talk to them about it. We're too busy trying to coddle up to these other people who we'd like to have. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. But that's this White House, and that's this president. And that's where we're going. And that's the people around it, the small group of people around it. Make no question about it. There's no question whatsoever, but at some point ISIS is going to be here. I was talking with my wife today, reminded her that in 1995 or 6, I don't remember which, I went to Beirut with Mike Walsh, 69. I was in my house one day, I got a telephone call Sunday afternoon, hadn't opened my first beer yet to watch football. Phone rings, I picked it up, you know, hello, I didn't use the answer phone, but I picked it up, hello, he said, Bill, this is Mike Walsh from 60 Minutes. There's a little pause, I said, Mike, I didn't do it. He got a big chuckle out of that. After that, he and I became pretty good friends. I was on 60 Minutes with him a couple times. We flew to Beirut. We stood in front of the U.S. Embassy that had been bombed in 1983, and I worked undercover operations in those days. And Mike looks at me and says, is something like this ever going to happen in the United States? And I said, Mike, it's just a matter of time. I guarantee you it's just a matter of time. Well, it wasn't that much time before it did happen. So, you know, some people say, well, you're out there trying to scare folks all the time. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm telling you what I know from my life experience. And you accept it or don't accept it, I don't care. But don't come back to me in 2 or 3 years when ISIS does some big thing up the street or down the street and say, wow, nobody told us. Yeah, there were people telling our government before 9/11 that there were things going on, but nobody wants to listen. They don't want to listen because it doesn't fit their mold, and besides they have too many other things to do that day. They don't need to take in and do input to make things happen. So is ISIS going to strike us? Remember this. What the time for me?
What about the time? Okay, that's question and answer.
I'm gonna have a question and answer. Look, you all should know this. ISIS and Al Qaeda are competing. Remember this, a year ago from right now, the president said ISIS is a JV. A year ago. Right, ISIS is a JV. Can you imagine? I tried to think back if there's been another episode in history where something grew that quickly that was that much a threat to so many people. I don't think there's one out there. He also said that Yemen was in September, just this past September, Yemen was an example of our success in counterterrorism. I'm having a hard time with all this. I try to be fair and objective about it, but when I go on TV to talk about Yemen, I'm not going to talk about what a success it is. We'll talk about all the stuff that's going down. We still have a long way to go. Look, ISIS and Al Qaeda are fighting for dominance. ISIS is way ahead. It's all social media. It's how do they get pictures out there of people getting their heads chopped off. It's how do they attract these literally millions of disaffected youth. I don't care why they're disaffected. The fact is that they are. They're all potential. I'm right here in the United States. Not all the Muslims. They all want to be part of this thing because ISIS is where it is. ISIS is serious, mean, tough, and they know how to take it to the battle. So people are joining them, and Al Qaeda's never done it. You know, Al Qaeda has been a very quiet, secretive presence, working out of the hills and caves in Afghanistan and Pakistan. They've got other little affiliates around the world, and there's more affiliates growing almost on a daily basis. I couldn't begin to name all the Al Qaeda this, and the Al Qaeda that, and the Al Qaeda somebody else. We don't have Al Qaeda San Francisco yet, but you know, don't hold your breath because it's just a matter of time. But the fact of the matter is that Al Qaeda and ISIS are fighting for dominance. ISIS is clearly winning. And some Al Qaeda affiliates have already pledged their allegiance to ISIS. It's just a matter of time. Do I believe myself? I'm an old operations guy. I'm all about how do you do something. You know, people tell you you can't do it. How do you do it? Make it happen. If I was the ISIS operations officer, I'd have probably done something over here by now. I'd have planted my flag in the United States. I could do something easier. I'm reminded of the DC snipers. Two guys driving around in a little Chevy Caprice with a hole in the front that they can shoot out of. I lived in DC then. It paralyzed the town. Everybody yelling, it's Al Qaeda, it's Al Qaeda, it's Al Qaeda. I said, it's not Al Qaeda. If it was Al Qaeda, they'd be doing it in 10 cities, not one. But those are little kinds of things that would upset our whole country. Right now, simple little things. They're not doing anything yet. So my guess has to be they're looking for something a little bit bigger. It's not hard to do. We don't, you know, I was on TV a few weeks ago talking about the passport waiver countries. A lot of countries where you don't need a passport to come from there to here. You don't need a visa anyway. You don't need a visa anyway. All you got to do is come across the southern border. And while you're coming, don't forget to bring a backpack with 50 pounds of C4 explosives. You know, I mean, don't wait to get it here. Come across with it. So again, I just try to paint this picture that, and I don't think it's going to happen right here. I don't think it's going to happen in Charlotte. I think, you know, it's a matter of what's a big name place. What's a place that's going to attract more attention? What's the kind of thing that's going to inspire more jihadis out there that say, wow, those guys in Chicago, wow, you know, oh man, we got to do that. We got to join them. They're awesome. So look, how do we fight all this stuff? I got to go back again to this point that there's plenty of Muslims out there that want to fight this just as bad. I don't see the Muslims in here tonight at all.
No.
We should have Muslim friends. I have great Muslim friends. And I don't, you know, they're as against these people as I am. Stand with me side by side. I'll tell you honestly. I worked the last couple of years with the Iraqi Special Operations Forces. Tough, mean Muslims. Trained by U.S. Special Operations Forces. Many of them brought to the States here and trained. Everybody knows about the bin Laden raid, how we went in the middle of the night, right, and flew into the combat. Those kinds of missions have been going on forever, just like that, in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're going on in Afghanistan still. Tonight, while we talk, somewhere in Afghanistan, there's a special ops team with Afghan special ops people, more than likely than not, getting on a helicopter, flying somewhere, dropping into a compound, snatching somebody or killing somebody or somebody's. Getting on a helicopter and flying back. Now, I've always complained bitterly to the Pentagon. I said, why don't you guys broadcast this? Why don't you let the American public know what we're doing? Well, we don't want the bad guys to know. I mean, you don't want the bad guys to know. You just dropped the helicopter on top of them, killed a bunch of them, captured a bunch of them, flew away with all their documents, and you think they don't know? I'm not kidding. That's the answer I got. We don't want the bad guys to know. I'm missing something. But my point being this, You need to understand clearly that a lot of these my Iraqi friends, I just lost a friend over there, he just got killed by ISIS. A lot of these guys are out doing that stuff all the time. They weren't necessarily just doing it for them, they were doing it for us. They were side by side with American forces who were out doing this stuff. A lot of them were killed doing that stuff, too, as much as we lost a number of our people. So we can't paint this big, all Muslims are bad picture. It's not so. And we're never going to defeat ISIS by ourselves. And we're never going to defeat Al-Qaeda by ourselves, or the other radical movements that grow around. We have to work with them to do it. People like President Al-Sisi, being a good example. We have an aggregate of threats out there facing us right now. I'm bouncing around, but I'll bounce just a little bit more, and then I'll quit. Russia. Everybody should know that right now Russian troops have moved back into the eastern Ukraine. Big numbers. I saw a number of 15,000 today, maybe more than that. They've taken a lot of equipment in there with them. We provided no pushback to Putin. Putin got the Crimea without a lot of people complaining about it. He already got portions of the eastern Ukraine without a lot of pushback. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about sanctions and this and everything else, but the Ukrainians keep asking us for defensive weapons. They haven't asked for anything offensive. Give us the things we need to stop the Russian advance. So far, we've given them night vision goggles, I think, maybe flak jackets, and meals ready to eat, and some police batons, or, you know, I mean, what are we doing? So Putin sees that. He says, well, these guys, we don't have to worry about the West. They're not going to do anything. Who else sees that? Our European allies see that. And Louis Gohmert, who I love Louis Gohmert. You watch that guy is where he is. He's my vice presidential candidate. We compare Louis Gohmert to Joe Biden. I mean, there you got it right there. Louis Gohmert, and you meet him, you know him personally, he is what he is. He said, when we were down in South Carolina, he said, you know, all of our allies only have one thing to fear, us. He's right. He's absolutely right. You know, our enemies don't fear us. Our allies don't fear us, and that's the problem. So look, all of our European allies then are watching our response to the Ukraine. We don't have any treaty obligations with Ukraine. If Russia attacks Ukraine full force, full might, makes their way all the way over to the border of the West, we're not obliged to do anything. We'll stand here and wring our hands and yell about sanctions, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do something else. But at the end of the day, Putin's going to own the Ukraine. If he keeps going the way he's going. But it's different. The same model that he used to get into Ukraine can be used in the Balkans. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. They all have Russian populations there, much as the Crimea did and eastern Ukraine did. You got Russian population, they're ethnic Russians, they still live the Russian culture. What Putin did was, in Ukraine and Crimea, is he sends a whole bunch of agent operatives in there, agents of influence, money, people who can go in and talk to their ethnic Russian pals, their relatives, gin up a real problem, gin up things that make it look like they're being persecuted, whether they are or not, create a story which tells Russia why we need our Russian compatriots to be in here to take care of us. The Balkans are worried about the same thing. And if Putin pulls it in the Balkans, and again, he hadn't been pushed back, so why would he try? If he pulls it in the Balkans, we have NATO treaty obligations. We are obliged. An attack on any member of NATO is an attack on all the members of NATO. So Russia has a clear ability to drag us into something we don't want to be in. But we're not doing anything to tell them that it's okay. And that's part of our problem. We may end up paying some kind of penalty for that. Quickly on China, you know, China's doing many of the same things over in their sphere of influence that Russia's doing. The Chinese are pushing the Philippines, they're pushing the Japanese, they're pushing Taiwan. They're doing anything they can to push themselves out more. China's an existential threat to us, not in the short term, but in the long term. They don't like the fact that we're the number one world power in the United States. So they're going to work at it until we're number 2 or 3. And it may not happen in my lifetime, it may happen in some of your lifetimes, but we're not going to be the big dog for a lot more years at the rate we're going right now. Terrorism is an incident here in the United States. It's not an existential threat to us. Syria, who knows, you know, we're going to empower 5,000 fighters. We're going to find and vet 5,000 Syrians to fight ISIS, which is 30,000 to 40,000 people. But while they're fighting ISIS, they're also going to be fighting Assad. So who wants to be one of those 5,000 guys? I don't mind being in a fight where I'm outnumbered, but I'd like to think somebody's got my back. Nobody has anybody's back on that one. We got real problems over there. I'm of the mind recently that Assad is the better option. I'm of the mind. Remember, Muammar Gaddafi was our enemy for a long time. We struck a deal with him. It worked out good for us until we stabbed him in the back, and ran him out, had him killed in a culvert somewhere. I'm thinking almost these days, what would I rather have, Assad or ISIS? Assad or al-Nusra and al-Qaeda? I mean, to me, it's pretty clear. I think I could find a way to work with Assad and help him stabilize that country to my benefit. What have I missed? All right, so look, I'm sorry, I just...
What do you like? Here's the first one.
I'm Mark, no, okay. So look, with that whirlwind spin here, and I'll say one thing. Again, my experiences are based on life experiences, most of them overseas. And I go home and get a good night's sleep every night. I'm not terribly worried. I'd be maybe a little more worried if I lived in Washington. And I've been in and out of the Middle East. I had friends in the Middle East, Muslim friends. I didn't operate with Americans over there. Muslim friends who took care of me from the moment I landed to the moment I left. I was in good hands, good stead. I'd go back there tonight if I could, although my wife would. She's scowling at me, sorry. All right, question. Yes, sir. I'll come right back. Yes, sir.
A question for you. You've enunciated the problems quite well tonight. What would you say the top 3 things people in this room can do to stop or at least reverse or at least stall the tide?
Great question. Thanks. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, but let me, well, first off, getting to our members of Congress on matters of importance definitely works, no question. I think Louis Gohmert, in fact, was the one who was telling us down at the Tea Party how some of the calls coming in really changed the vote. That Boehner was going to have one thing happen, and all of these constituents across the country were calling their congressmen and women, and Boehner got the message, and I don't recall the details, and totally changed whatever he was going to vote on. So there's no question that contacting your congressman, now you can't contact them every day about everything that's going on. You need to be selective about it. But I think another thing that's important, and I had a long conversation with a trusted friend today who I respect as one of the great military thinkers of my time and frankly many years. We both had a conversation about when our next president comes in, assuming he's a Republican, the first thing he has to do is clean out the Pentagon. You have to clean out the Pentagon. The military leadership has failed us. All of us in my area believe the same. They've totally failed us. They're all about PC. They're all about how do we appease ourselves. And I told somebody tonight, the problem is that we begin, I say this in general, some of whom I trust in life, most of whom I don't. You make one star, the most important thing in your life doesn't become the truth, it doesn't become the mission, it becomes 2 stars. You make 2 stars, the most important thing is 3 stars. Hey, I'm only one away from 4 stars. And you know what? George Bush really screwed us all. When he took a 4-star general, Cowan, and made him the Secretary of the Department, Secretary of State, every 4-star gets his 4-star and starts thinking, I'm not done. I'm not done. I can go somewhere else. I know a guy up there who busted his tail on Hillary Clinton's campaign, 4-star, because he was convinced if she won, he was going to be a secretary or something. And that's reflected in things that he says and does. Still, he probably still thinks she's a good contender. Probably is. So those 2 things, I mean, I think we need to look for good leadership. I don't know who it is yet. I have my wife and I were with Governor Huckabee today. I know him because I was on his show a few times. I like him a lot. I don't really need my candidate. We like other people. There's a lot of really good people out there. You know, we're never all going to find the one person that meets every one of our needs, but we've got to find somebody that meets most of our needs. Because if Hillary Clinton is our president, we better all start moving to some places. We're in big trouble. We're not going to get out. Anyway, I didn't answer your question totally because I hadn't thought about it, but I like the question. I'll think about it next time.
That question is, looks like Tehran is saying he has gone up for Lebanon again. I mean,
Israel.
Again. If that happens, is Israel going to be cleared to bomb Beirut?
Well, Israel bombed Beirut in the previous Hezbollah war. And they shouldn't have done it, but they made a big mistake. Israel bombed, for those of you who followed the war in 2007 between Israel and Hezbollah, and again, I spent a lot of time there, a lot of time in Lebanon. I don't know why they did this. They bombed the Christian sections of Beirut. They bombed, I got on them on TV, it was stupid. They got off to a slow start. The Israelis believed an air campaign alone, much like we do with ISIS, was going to lead to victory in that war, and it didn't. So they started out with an air campaign for a long time. Hezbollah tightened up, had the troops all lined in. The Israelis finally had to put ground troops in, and they took a lot of casualties trying to do it. And you know, a lot of us were saying, you don't need to go all the way into Beirut to do what you need to do, but you need to do something. I don't think this president's going to authorize anything. I think if the Israeli, you know, we go right after Israel when they do something that we don't like, and this administration doesn't like.
I don't expect it to, I don't think it will. But where is Egypt going to stand then?
Well,
If Iran is overtly playing that card with Hezbollah.
Look, remember, again, this goes back to the Sunni-Shia divide. Egypt being Sunni and Iran being Shia. And we used to talk about the Shia Crescent, which is finding its way there, that goes from Iran across Iraq over to Syria, down to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And that thing is, you know, ISIS has kind of cut that in two, but it's still out there. I mean, Hezbollah is still supported more than ever by the Iranians. In fact, you might remember when the peace accord or ceasefire was UN resolution. Let me get it right. I thought about it. UN resolution, which ended the last Israeli-Hezbollah conflict. One of the things was there were going to be UN peacekeepers and there were going to be UN observers to make sure no more weapons were moved into Hezbollah. Are you kidding? They built a 4-lane highway and started running 18-wheelers in. Hezbollah is more well-armed right now than ever, and they've got these bigger, more powerful, longer-range rockets in there. So this little thing that flared up has kind of died out. I give all credit. I'll tell you, I love the Israelis. They killed a bunch of Hezbollah guys, and they killed an Iranian general in this strike they made up in the Golan Heights. I love it. I love it. They killed Imad Diaz's son. Imad Diaz was the guy that's responsible for the Beirut bombing that killed 241 Marines, and did a lot of other things before he was killed in Syria a couple of years ago.
The
So,
question is, will Sisi?
I don't think he'll do anything. I don't think he wants to take it that far. If he sees Egypt being threatened, he'll do something. But I think he'll give tacit support to whatever the Israelis do, because he realizes that threat. He realizes that arm from Iran stretches not only into Hezbollah and Lebanon, but into Hamas down in Gaza. And that's serious business for those guys. But, you know, I'm more concerned about what this administration will do, which is going to be bad for the Israeli threat. Tell them to knock it off. Yes, sir.
What's your position on Bo Bergdahl, and why do you think the military, probably pushed by the president, was so slow coming out with the truth of the investigation that's been long over?
Yeah, did everybody hear the question? Yeah. I wrote a piece on the Fox website here a couple of weeks ago, which is still up there pretty high at the top about the Bo Bergdahl thing, and I was on TV the other day about the predicament that General Milley, who is the convening authority for whether or not there will be a court-martial, he's in a pickle. He's got two things facing him. If he lets him off totally, then the White House is going to be on him. He's seen his last star. Going back to this star thing. And if he charges him, if he lets him off, I got it back now. If he charges him, the White House is going to be upset. If he lets him off, all of our men and women who have served, who have something in the game, are going to be upset. But then, here's what's kind of interesting about it, the more I look at it. If he charges him for desertion, which is probably what's going to happen. I think Tony Schaefer was way in front of the news the other day, backtracking about it. He shouldn't have said it. Tony Schaefer being the Fox guy who said he could be charged with desertion in the charging papers, or he would give it to his attorney. I don't think that's right. Here's the thing. The problem is going to end up being what if he's charged with some kind of desertion. That's not going to be good for the White House. But consider this. What if he gets charged with desertion? And he gets one of the best pro bono, progressive, left-wing lawyers he can in America. And he's found, for whatever reason, not guilty. That vindicates the White House. We knew all along he wasn't guilty, and that's why we traded those 5 Taliban. This is a tough, and I haven't heard anybody really filled it out, but you look at the elements of proof. One of the elements of proof is whether or not he was going to come back. And he can argue, well, I tried to come back because there are intelligence reports that says he tried to escape. Well, I didn't mean to go forever. I just went out in town to have a couple of beers. He was out in town to open it up with some local Afghans who then got sparked up by the Haqqani network. It wasn't the Taliban. And the Haqqanis were really the ones that had him forever. But nonetheless, there may be an argument that, well, I just paid, man, I was going out in town to have fun. All those letters and emails and sending my stuff home didn't mean anything. That was spur of the moment. But I wasn't spur of the moment when I wanted to come back. This is a real dilemma. I think General Milley wants to do it in favor of the military, but he's got to be careful about what he lays out there. And I'm sure he's got people in there saying, okay, if I charge him with this, how's he going to wiggle out? If I charge him with that, how's he going to wiggle out? And I would take note of one thing. We had prisoners from Vietnam who were guys that walked off the base, out into the Ville, they had a few beers and chased a woman. Some of them never returned. Some of them got captured by the Viet Cong and returned 5 or 6 years later as prisoners of war. Can you imagine Bo Bergdahl being given a prisoner of war status, which grants him upwards of $3,500 a month the rest of his life, educational benefits and medical benefits above what other veterans get the rest of his life? No way. So I'm not quite in that rush to judgment. I'm a little bit critical of what's going on. Admiral Kirby the other day said, well, there's no pressure from the White House or the Pentagon on General Milley. Yeah, okay, Admiral. Yeah, I'm with you, Admiral. Anyway, I hope that answered the question. It's not easy. I'm going to err in favor of the general right now. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know your opinion of the fact that his parents were at the White House in the Rose
Oh.
Garden talking a foreign language. Didn't they basically say they wanted to have their flag over our White House?
Oh, I didn't hear that. The mayor. Well, no, the bad guys have said that. ISIS has said that. I didn't hear that.
Bergdahl's parents.
I wouldn't be surprised if anything. I think this White House is so stupid. So stupid. Valerie Jarrett, Susan Rice, I think they, and Ben Rhodes, I think they honestly believe that America was going to be euphoric. I think in their own minds, this is how stupid and how insulated they are. They thought America was going to be over the top with happiness that we got this poor guy back. That just tells you something about what's going on in the inner workings of that place. Nothing good. Pardon?
Do we have a sleeper cell?
Yeah, should we have a sleeper cell?
Do we have a sleeper cell?
No, we don't. I keep waiting for one good Secret Service agent to have an accidental discharge. Gotta be. I'm sorry, I know that's being filmed. On my Secret Service buddy, I said that to a Secret Service friend of mine one time. He got ashen. He didn't think it was funny. I was only kidding. You better ask me 2 times because I'll forget the second one.
You said that they had the Muslim Brotherhood at the State Department. Are the Muslim Brotherhood people in our White House working?
Yes, yeah. We have people in the White House who are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. Valerie, Valerie Jarrett. I hear all that. I'm not subscribing too much to it, but there are a number of people clearly identified as being affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Hillary Clinton's, whom her family's all Muslim Brotherhood. So, you know, any of you who don't know a lot about the Muslim Brotherhood, do a little bit of looking at it. They're very well organized, very well funded, very long-term perspective on how they get inside and influence things. Very pervasive. And if you don't believe me, ask President al-Sisi in Egypt. They've seen it. They watched it up close. What happened to them was nothing compared to what they expected. So the Muslim Brotherhood is out there. They've got a lot of friends and allies in the United States. And they're a problem for us. And you know, the Saudis have outlawed them as a terrorist organization. The Egyptians have declared them a terrorist organization. A whole bunch of people have. Not us. They're at the State Department yesterday, flashing the sign. They're here, don't worry.
And we pay them with our tax dollars.
We pay them with their tax dollars.
Now, the one of the prisoners, for Bergdahl, is reaching out to Taliban.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all. No, we should expect all 4 of those guys to be back at some point affiliated with the Taliban in one form, fashion, or another. There should be no surprises. Remember, the recidivism rate up until about last year, and again, I don't recall right now the number of people who were released, was about 30%. They believed it was 30%. 30% of those released were either known to return to terrorism or were strongly believed on the basis of intelligence to return. Well, that's the previous guys. We're down to 124 or 123 of the really hardcore guys. What do we think the recidivism rate might be of the most hardcore guys? Remember how many it takes to do something really nasty and bad? That's it. Take 1 American life, take 10 American lives. It takes 1. Yes, sir.
We talk about the Muslim Brotherhood in D.C. How are we allowing that to happen? I just don't understand. I don't get it. Our military leaders, I mean, how is this happening?
We don't, it's a leadership problem. And then it's also a matter of political correctness. you know, we just don't want to stand up, take a stand. And I have to say honestly, if we get a Republican president in there, we'd like to think that he's going to go in and clean out the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not going to be, today I announce anybody affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood is out. It won't happen like that. It's just not going to happen. We're going to have to get them out of there. It's going to have to be by identifying individuals who are doing things that are inimical to our nation. They're out there doing stuff, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Yes, sir.
What's your opinion about what really happened in Benghazi, and do you think they'll ever get to the bottom of it?
Yeah, you know what, I'm not, the Benghazi thing, I'm not as well versed on it as I should be. And some of you may know there's a big breaking news story today about Hillary Clinton and the whole Libya issue. Follow it if you can, because apparently the military was trying to go around her, believing that she was absolutely upside down about Libya and Gaddafi. And so the Benghazi thing, here's where I come on Benghazi. I think there's a lot we're not going to learn. Unfortunately, I trust Trey Gowdy. I believe he's going to do his best. I believe the government's going to stonewall it every bit that they can. They're doing it effectively so far, just delaying the release of documents. My issue about Benghazi, my personal issue, is the failure of the military. I'm not as much on Ambassador Stevens. I believe it's running guns. I understand those kinds of operations. I understand the purpose of them. Not if the guns are going to the bad guys, but if the guns are going to the people he wants to. Those kinds of things happen. You know, you don't need an ambassador to be doing that. He may or may not have been involved. My issue is the failure of the military to respond. I worked in those quick reaction units for a long time. Your number one job, you got your pack and your gun and everything right there in your locker, and you don't go more than 20 minutes away from that locker. And when you get the call, you go. And I think the Pentagon totally failed, totally. And the excuse was, well, you know, it would have been over before we got there. How do you know that? You don't know when it was going to be over. It's absolutely inexcusable. And they all should have been fired. They should have been fired right then. We've got a couple military people who come through. One two-star general, I don't recall his name right now, who was pretty candid before one of the committees. But, you know, the committees are more focused on Hillary and the State Department than they are on military response, unfortunately. So I'd like to think we're going to get the truth. I'm not sure that they are. Yes, sir.
The thing I don't appreciate about this administration is that people around the world apologizing for the American citizens. Excuse me, but the American citizens are not causing it. The politician needs to man up and take responsibility for what they're causing and what they're doing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then it's, once again, it's a failure to exhibit leadership. We don't have a true leader right now. We definitely don't. And everybody out there knows that. The whole world knows that. It's interesting to see how some of his numbers globally have gone down. The world needs a leader. Everybody wants somebody to be in charge. You can't have global mayhem. And we've always been looked at as a world leader or anything but now. One of the complaints about Paris was, you know, when they had all the world leaders went to Paris, the first thing the White House said, well, we weren't invited. Well, no surprise. We know you weren't, because you're not a world leader. That's why you weren't invited. They got off of that. We weren't invited real quick when they realized what they meant.
He's a world follower.
Or a world follower, and not necessarily a good follower either. Yes, sir.
Switching topic a little bit, regarding Russia and Ukraine, it seems like one of the reasons there hasn't been a strong response in Europe is because of Russia's near monopoly on energy, specifically natural gas. And here we are in this country with now a surplus of natural gas. So do you know of, or would there be any talk about putting a liquid natural gas terminal in Riga or in Brest or in Hamburg or Sebastopol or something like that, and using our natural gas reserves as a geopolitical weapon in the same way that Russia is using theirs in Europe?
Okay, no question. The European response to what Russia's doing has been very tepid because of that, energy concerns. And interestingly enough, in northern Iraq and Kurdistan, where I spent a lot of time, major oil and gas reserves have just been found that can make their way up through Turkey into Europe. So that's something in the future. I heard, this is not necessarily my area, but I heard something, I believe on the radio 2 days ago about legislation just being passed that dealt with the authorization for the movement of natural gas offshore. And I don't know the details of it. It was just that this was kind of some big deal where now we can start moving natural gas for that reason to Europe. But it's going to take time to build anything over there to receive it, and that means a couple hard winters. So again, you get back to this, you know, what can we do in the short term to take care of. The Europeans are scared. We can talk about sanctions all day long. It scares the heck out of them. They're not standing up basically for that reason.
How dangerous is what's going on in Saudi Arabia right now with the, the changing of the guard?
Yeah, I don't sense, I try to follow that a little bit. I don't sense that there's any real problems. I think the new king is so far, looks like he's pretty much aligned with us. But let's see what happens on the Saudi participation in the coalition against ISIS. Now look, the Saudis are very scared. The Saudis are Sunni and ISIS is Sunni. Saudi Arabia is the home to Mecca and Medina, the two holiest sites in the Islamic world. And ISIS wants them, and the Saudis know it. So here we have now, we talked before about the Sunni-Shia divide. This is the Sunni-Sunni divide. ISIS wants Mecca and Medina. That's their long-term goals. I said the other day that they lost Kobani, as anybody who's followed that knows. They overextended themselves. They probably learned from that lesson. They were having so much success that they ran in every direction to grab what they could. They just took a couple of defeats. I think they're going to consolidate a little bit, and the Saudis know that. So I think it forces the Saudis to be more aligned with us than they have been in the past. We never hear about how much money they're contributing to some of these things. Why is the United States paying for everything? Why aren't the Saudis putting billions of good? Well, I'll tell you one reason. A lot of their billions have gone to, from some members of the royal family to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, just to follow up, I mean, wouldn't that give us a good opportunity, obviously not with Obama, but to force their hand, because who are they going to turn to?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. They don't have a big military. What they do have is pretty good, equipped and trained by the United States, but they're going to find themselves in big trouble if ISIS continues to have success moving south. And if you look at the map from where ISIS is, it goes down to Anbar. Anbar are all Sunni tribes. So at one point were aligned with us. There was a lot of work going in to get the Sunni tribes to fight with us against the insurgents. And when we left money for Maliki to continue to pay him. Remember, money is the secret of getting friends sometimes. We left Maliki with a lot of money to pay the Sunni tribes to stay on our side and quit paying. So some of those Sunni tribes are aligned with ISIS right now. Others are kind of on our side. But that's the gateway to Saudi Arabia, right to Al-Anbar, right across the border into Mecca and Medina. So I would say the dynamics over there will continue to play out. Saudis we don't see too much visibility about them. They've got their own internal issues, but nothing that strikes a big chord and threatens us. All right, wait, two more questions? Is that okay? Two more.
Two more? First of all, it's great to have you here tonight. Thank you. Can you tell us about your new book, Snatching Hillary? and could you talk a little bit maybe about the inspiration, if you can?
All right, thanks for asking me. That was a setup question. You know what? I've been asked for years to write a book about my experiences. I'd love to. Can't, because so much of it is still pretty classified. I'm trying to do something. But Tucker, excuse me, any of you who know Tucker Carlson, who's a good friend, his father's my best friend, Ambassador Dick Carlson, the director of the Voice of America when the wall came down. You know, the Voice of America was the most important thing we had going to bring the wall down. Speaking into Eastern Europe and getting people in there inspired, Poland, all the other countries ended up going. The people there listened to the Voice of America every night. Dick, my partner in this book, was the director of the Voice of America. I don't think there's anybody in Washington, D.C. more connected to him. He knows Hillary. We always talk bandied about writing a book sometime, and we finally decided to write a novel about Hillary. It's the only novel out there about Hillary. There's a lot of people writing about Hillary. There's stuff on the left about Hillary. This is the novel about Hillary. And it's as much a novel as it is fact. It's funny as can be. It starts out with her being kidnapped just before the 2016 New Hampshire primary, when her Secret Service detail stumbles. And I laugh when I think about it, and I've read it 100 times editing it. I laugh every time I read it. There's a fair amount of intrigue in it. Again, a lot of fact, and I know one person who read it said I spent half the time Googling the names in here and finding out that not only were the names correct, but so were the things that you talked about. So the reader has to kind of make their way through that. There's a surprise ending. We were going to have Mike Huckabee win the election. I told him this today. But he doesn't in our book. Somebody else wins the election, which itself is a surprise ending, good for a lot of giggles and laughs. And we put it out at the end of November. Book sales have been pretty good. Everybody is. I can tell we've had 4 or 5 people on Amazon who were hardcore lefties. They read it, didn't like it. But we had a lot of liberals, Dick's friends, liberals read it and loved it because they see the humor in it. But here's the message in it. The message in the book is who Hillary Clinton really is. And Dick knows her well. I know enough about her from being around Washington. She's a smart person. She's also despicable. I'm a retired Marine. She could cuss me under the table in a minute. And that's the vernacular that she uses all the time. And she also, she really treats people around here, except her personal staff, terrible. Terrible. Her secrecy was in service detail. It's unimaginable that those guys are dedicated to saving her life, and the way she treats them is totally despicable. So anybody who wants a good read, if anybody buys it tonight, you might pick it up and not go to sleep if you finish it. It'll catch you, it'll get you going, it's fast. You get plenty of giggles. All in all, a good read. Thank you for asking.
One more over here, I think.
I'm sorry. One last question, get too long. No.
I just want to bring it back to Benghazi for a moment. And I share your disappointment in the military in not getting something done that time. But the stand down order,
Yeah.
that's the hang up. And somebody needs to stand down. And, you know, there was ranking officials over there in the military who abided by that order. We need to know who made that.
Here's what I think.
And it might be Hillary.
Here's what I think. I think and it might be. I think the stand down order came from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. From the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I think he made that order on the basis of Hillary telling him something or Obama telling him something. I think it came from the very top. Because if you look again at these special reaction forces who are over there with the sole purpose of reacting, and they didn't get called on to react, and that's their job. You know, it has to come from somebody way up the line. I mean, who in the middle is going to want to do a stand down order, not knowing what's going on, and miss an opportunity to save them, and then have to explain to the president or the Secretary of Defense, well, gee, I didn't know it was my mistake. No, that kind of decision you're getting to has to go all the way to the top. And I don't know that we're going to find that's the case.
But they didn't want any witnesses left over from Stevens running weapons to,
There are people out there still, and the committee cannot get to them because the administration is hiding them, doing a good job of hiding them, and those people that won't come forward because they can't know that if they do somehow come forward, they're going to be fired. They're out on the street. And that's the issue for them. It's fear and intimidation. It's too bad. Let me say quickly, thank you. Thank you, Mary Lou, for inviting me out.